But over these many years, government has constantly grown, and therefore the attack on our personal liberties have been constant and steady. The economy now is in shambles because of constant debt, and there's no recognition that the correction for constant debt is liquidation of debt. Get rid of the debt. If you got into trouble and had too much debt, or your business had too much debt, you couldn't have economic growth if your credit ran out unless you got rid of your debt. You'd have to work harder and pay off your debt, do new jobs, or live more cautiously and live within your means. A country that lives over its means for a long time will be destined to live beneath its means, and that is what's happening right now. The country is poorer because everything is based on debt. And this is the reason the middle class is getting smaller, the middle class is getting poorer, and there's another characteristic of what happens when a country destroys its money and power gravitates into a central location like the federal government. The power then takes the value or takes the wealth of the middle class. It's automatically transferred to the wealthy. And this is what's been happening. During the bubble formation, Wall Street and the banks, they did quite well during the housing bubble. And then they got to gambling. They got to gambling with these derivatives, and they got themselves over their head. They went bankrupt. And then they come rushing for help to the government and the Federal Reserve and say that you got to bail us out. We're too big to fail. We're too big to fail. The whole economy is going to come down if you don't help us. So what did they do? The Congress and the Federal Reserve bailed them out. And what happened to the bad debt that should be liquidated? The bad debt was dumped on the people. That is what happened. And the very people that were supposed to be helped with these government programs and easy credit so everybody would have a house, guess what? They lost their jobs and they lost their houses and they're still suffering. Economic planning doesn't work unless it's done by the people, not by the government or central bank. We have a system today based on entitlements, and it's based on the assumption that some people have a tough time and we have to help them out. And the bleeding hearts say, look, if you don't want to help the people, that means you're heartless, you don't care about people, you're not a humanitarian. But I've come to the conclusion that the humanitarian instincts of almost all people, whether they disagree on solutions, but we have humanitarian instincts, that if the humanitarian instinct drives you to say that we are going to have forced redistribution of wealth, guess what? There's not as much wealth. The humanitarian instinct should drive us to the free market, to property rights and sound money and limited government and less war. Then you will help the maximum number of people, and you will have the largest, wealthiest middle class under those conditions. Sounds like a good word. It sounds like a right, but the use of the word entitlement today isn't. That means some people believe they're entitled to what you make and earn and produce. But you don't have a right to somebody else's property. But you should have a right and be entitled to keep what you earn. That's what we need. System is sold to the masses, and the masses believe they're going to always be taken care of, and you're going to have free education and free houses, free medical care. The whole works. And guess what? The entitlement system is built to really help the very wealthy who know how to manipulate the system. And the poor end up with the crumbs, although they were talked into accepting the entitlement system because they thought they were going to get the help necessary. But today, there is a challenge going on because they talk about the wealthy, and I already have, and criticize those who get bailed out, and the very wealthy who benefit from the destruction of money and through the inflationary system. But you don't want to throw out everybody who's wealthy. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy if you earn your money honestly. That's a big difference. The wealthy get wealthy because they deliver a service to the people. If we make an individual wealthy because they provide a good product, and we vote for that product, and they become wealthy, but they get no benefits, they get nothing special from the government, no bailouts, no contracts, or anything, they should be entitled to keep that. But those who are in the military-industrial complex or in the financial system that benefits from the monetary system that we have, they're not entitled to that. They don't deserve the bailouts, and they should be challenged, so we have to sort out the two. If we do that, I believe we can return to a much more prosperous economy where we can have growth and jobs once again. Is wasteful and it encourages corruption. A lot of people complain about the lobbyists having control, and they do. There's too much control by lobbyists in Washington. But the lobbyist is a consequence. They are the symptom of the problem. Because lobbying is something that is encouraged by the fact that the government's running an auction. You know, H.L. Mencken said there was an auction off of stolen goods, and that's what the government does. So people have an incentive, the business people, everybody has an incentive to go to Washington because there's this redistribution of wealth and they have this incentive. Now, what we have to do is get the power out of Washington, get the money out of Washington. You won't have the incentive to go up and try to buy this power and control. But today, we have a system that has been totally undermined, and the special interests do have control of it. But another way we could solve this, if we, once again, had only those people who were dedicated to the Constitution, who weren't influenced by these special interests and couldn't be bought off, this would all come to an end as well. Well, didn't the lobbyists get to you and lobby you? And I said, well, on occasion they did, but they found out that it didn't do any good, you know. But the system of entitlements is something that has to be addressed, but the other thing I talk about a whole lot, and the place where I want to do the first cutting, because I do want to start, you know, with a token cut in the first year of $1 trillion in 1 year. And even though our system of government in the last 40, 50, 60 years has conditioned so many to be so dependent on government, and some are tragically dependent on government, when you think of the elderly dependent on medical care and the children dependent on medical care, I don't believe that is the place where you start to cut. You don't start to cut on the food stamp program because the conditions have been created by bad government. So I want to work our way out of it. I want to have priorities. So where my priorities are to cut the big bucks are the dollars that we spend so foolishly overseas. Just for the spending overseas. Just think if we would have had those strict constitutionalists that I long for in Washington, where we would only go to war with a declaration of war and no other way. Of the founders of the country and the revolutionaries against the British. So the king would go to war, and then they would get taxed to pay for the wars. So we need to go to war only if there's a declaration. If there's a need to it, and to defend this country, we should declare the war as we did in World War II. Go fight and win it, and just come home. That's what we need to do. Fighting two huge nations, Germany and Japan. In less than 4 years, they were defeated. And yet here we are. We're in Afghanistan, and believe it, we're not out of Iraq yet. I'll tell you, we're in a mess, and they're looking to go into Syria and Iran. It's just constant. But we've been doing this for 10 years. And it makes no sense whatsoever. But if we only gone with a declaration of war, we wouldn't have gone into these wars since, you know, it's Korea, Vietnam, and everything since have been gone basically by the executive branch. So, if you decide that I'm going to be in the executive branch, I will not go to war without a proper directive from the people and the U.S. Congress. We should not be and cannot be the policemen of the world. We should not be involved in the internal affairs of other nations. And we certainly should not go to war under a UN resolution. There's always reasons to go to war, and sometimes the reasons they give us are not true. Some people call those lies. But certainly the conditions under which we went into Iraq, they turned out, they were not true, and many of us knew they wouldn't be true. But I'll tell you what, things are not a lot different right now. Even though the war drums are beating hard to go to Syria and go to Iran, it's very, very similar to what was happening on the preparation to go into Iraq. The Iraqi war was planned many years before. The first talk in the House floor I ever gave was in 1998, believing that there was war coming and I was trying to head it off. But that didn't happen until after 9/11. 9/11, a terrible day in our history, but I think it's been misunderstood. I do not believe that we were attacked, nor will we be attacked because we're free and prosperous. I do not believe that is the reason. Whether it's an economic crisis that requires us to bail out those in privileged positions, or when we have an international crisis like 9/11, it's used as an excuse to do the very things they've been wanting to do all along. Yeah. Of course, it turned out there were no weapons of mass destruction. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Guess what? There's Al-Qaeda in Iraq today. And this whole idea that, well, we have to go wherever they are. The terrorists are everywhere. And there are Taliban everywhere. We have to kill every Taliban. But you know, the Taliban are not the Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda are radical enough, and they're incensed enough that they want to come here, and they do want to kill us because of the problems that we've had with our foreign policy. But Taliban are people who want to just foreigners off their land, whether they're the Soviets or whether it's the United States or the French or the British. They just want to be left alone. And if we're going to try to... that is, if they are defending their homeland and we're trying to kill them and they want to kill us because we're there, the more we go in, the more Taliban there's going to be, the more the people that, it's a catch-22, there's no ending to it. That is why the non-interventionist foreign policy of the founders makes so much sense. Let them deal with their problems, we'll deal with our problems here at home. Quickly and say, oh, you're a bunch of isolationists. You don't want to deal with the world. But you know what? It's exactly the opposite. Guess who the isolationists are? The isolationists are the ones who want to put sanctions on all these countries to punish them. And what do? They really punish them and have an overthrow government? They solidify the power and bring out their own nationalism. So when we try to punish the Iranians, we solidify the power of Ahmadinejad. It does the opposite. I don't know whether they do it on purpose or they just don't know what they're doing. But it isn't good. It doesn't work.
They know what they're doing.
But sanctions is a part of the isolationism that they accuse us of. And because the founders, and what I believe is that we should be friends with as many people as we can, trade with people, and travel with people around the world. From Cuba. Why can't we travel to Cuba? but I'll tell you what, the theory behind what the founders thought and what free markets describe is that when you're free, having free trade in markets, there's a self-interest involved to stay that way and not fight each other. You know, we were fighting the communists, we were fighting the Chinese, we were fighting the Vietnamese communists, and of course that war went very poorly. We lost that war. We came home. 1 million Vietnamese died, and 60,000 Americans died. But we had to come home. And they warned us. They said there would be this horrible, horrible thing. There would be a domino effect, and the communists would take over the whole world. Well, guess what? It must be free markets that moved in that direction, left our country, because now our banker's in China. So it hasn't worked all that well. But just think now. We do trade and talk to China under imperfect situations, but just think, we're not killing each other. When I was in high school, you know, we were killing each other. A teacher of mine went off to Korea and didn't come back. It made no sense to me. But what about Vietnam? Now we trade with them. We invest over there. They come over here. Imperfect. We're imperfect. They're imperfect. But just think how much more was achieved in peace, which was never achieved in all that fighting for 20 years. Atmosphere that surrounds war and various kinds of wars, whether it's the wars overseas or the atmosphere dealing with civil liberties here at home, when you have another war that goes on against the American people that causes so much trouble and so much undermining of our civil liberties, that is that onerous war on drugs that has caused so much